welcome, Ian. How you doing?
Hey, thanks for having me on, man.
Good.
How's it
Yeah.
going?
And you live in lot of people think and I thought you were an American, but you actually live
I,
in like
uh,
Kuala Lumpur, right?
yeah, Kuala Lumpur. I move around. Sometimes Singapore, sometimes Kuala Lumpur. Right now, Kuala Lumpur. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah, just no accent at all. It sounds like you were
Nope.
raised in the United States.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's what the people feel like they've been catfished, right? They'll retweet me and they'll see me talking about American politics and wonder, this person's got to be American, right? But no, he's not American. He's not from America. But I've been there. Contrary to popular belief, I have in fact been to the United States of America.
All right. I said, but you are a member of the East right now as far as geography goes.
Yes, that is correct.
So we're gonna talk about like the Chinese social credit score system. Now we're gonna do a balanced coverage of this, what it is, what it isn't, some of the defenses and some of the serious concerns here. Um, what comes to mind? Like how would you give this a broad overview?
I would say it's a way to maintain social control. It's a way for the Chinese government to dictate the actions of the residents of China. Right? It's kind of what do you call it? Social engineering, right? Like it's kind of like a video game. Video games got rules in them, so you got to follow the rules if you want to win, right? Same way here, except it's real life, and it's a way for them to control you. It's a way to dictate good behavior, social behavior, behavior that is not antisocial. They don't want they don't want people to start talking about revolution, for example. And being a communist state, it's a very fragile place, right? It's a very fragile government. So that's how I would classify it.
Okay, okay. Now as far as how invasive does this get? Where we're looking at, and I've read articles, and the one listed here mentions things like penalties for bad driving, traffic offenses, jaywalking, smoking on trains, not cleaning
Yep.
up after your dog, not having your dog on a leash. Now, not paying debts, not paying taxes. Okay, that may be somewhat more reasonable, but watching pornography, playing too many video games, is this true?
Oh yeah, yeah. That's completely true. I mean, this is not finalized, right? Every province in China has their own thing, and they're experimenting with what works and what does not. Because I feel, right, and I think it's a good feeling, that the Chinese government doesn't want the social credit system to be too restrictive. They want to give people the illusion of freedom, after all, right? If It's much better to have some leeway to give the people some feeling that they have some control over their lives and not just take everything away. Because we've seen what happened with the USSR, we've seen what happened with places like North Korea. It's very untenable, right, to lead a country where the people are literally afraid to speak out or do anything because they might get arrested. And that's no way to lead a country, especially one that is wants to control the whole world, right? I mean, we've seen what China does, we've seen what they're capable of, and they don't want people to be afraid of them. They want to be seen as the good guys, right? So it's all about giving people this illusion of security and freedom. I mean, it is secure, I will give it that, but they want to maintain the idea that it's a good system that people will willingly embrace and adopt and not rebel against.
Right. So this is something that they're doing to for their own internal. We made roads, for example, in the
Yeah.
interstate project, right? This was
Libertarian state
infrastructure.
roads. Yeah.
So, but they're kind of billing this as almost like a civil infrastructure, except for to create a culture of trust between the people.
Yes, that is correct. Yeah, because in East Asian societies, I would say in places like Japan, South Korea, there's this huge amount of trust, and China doesn't have that. China is not a very cohesive society. Because of the way that the laws are structured, people are afraid to. Let's say you're driving a car, you accidentally hit another person. People in those situations, they're afraid to help their fellow man because they will get sued for it, and they will be responsible for that person for perhaps the rest of their lives. So they oftentimes might murder that person, and this is not ideal for the Chinese government. So they want to instill in people, train in them a sense of a duty to their fellow citizen, right? The idea that their actions impact more than themselves. So they're not narcissistic. They're not objectivist, if you will, right? That's the whole idea of this Chinese social credit system.
Okay, but like, yeah, but murder. I mean, wow, like the
Murder, yeah.
that.
Murder a baby, murder a child, murder an old woman who was crossing the road at the wrong time. There's dozens of these videos on the internet. They're all real. They seem weird, right? You see a person dying at the side of the road, and just people just walk by because anyone who tries to help that person, maybe even saves that person, may be responsible for that person's life. And now this is very bad for the Chinese government. I mean, the stuff goes viral on the internet, and of course, Chinese citizens themselves are not happy about it. I mean, yeah, and yet that's how the system is. So Chinese government wants to make it so that people have a more sense of a duty to one another. And you can obviously blame communism, or rather the cultural revolution that happened so many years ago, decades ago even, for the reason why China is in its dystopic state, right? It wasn't always like this. Back in the 1930s, it wasn't like this. Taiwanese are not like this, and they are the real China. They're the good China, I would say.
So
And fake China wants to become part of that again. Be more like them, more human, if
okay,
you will.
so Han Chinese culture is what you're saying. It was disrupted by communism, and
Oh,
has kind of
absolutely.
fragmented
Yeah.
the trust. And Foreign Policy magazine tends to agree with you there. They quote that after Mao Zedong's rule, the Chinese were forced into communes and farmed collectively to disastrous effect. They had their
Yes.
status measured as a group. So there were Danwei, which were work units whose members were apportioned to public goods and were ranked based on their good or bad political standards. These groups were supposed to police their own members, but these efforts inevitably led to the violent political struggles of the Maoist era. So
Yep.
so communism is like in the struggle sessions and calling each other out, spying on your neighbors, constantly being a tattletale's done everything to erode social trust in China.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right. It's the same as East Germany. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Interesting. Yeah. I guess you're right. That would be interesting. I wonder if Russia has that same problem too.
Right
Um.
now, probably not, but I think that during the USSR times, maybe the early days of the NKVD, right
Mhm.
before, well, during Stalin's time, I would say, but not after. Not after, like afterwards, they stopped being like that because they had many years to change. Whereas China was always, really repressive, right, to a degree that was far worse than the USSR.
Okay. And as far as like calling this being a new thing, this thing apparently has been called for a while. Former President Jiang Jing, if I get things right, are Jiang Zemin in '95 called,
And yeah,
okay, called for the information or informationalizing, I guess that's a tough
yeah,
word, automation and intelligenceization of economic aid and social management. And his successor, Hao Jiantou, attempted to automate social surveillance through modern grid and policing projects such as Shanghai. So, so this is something that's been on the rise for a while, or is this
yep.
just the finally the technologies there that they wanted all along?
Yeah, I mean, like, obviously, back when they were first developing it, there wasn't much of an internet, right? I mean, much of China is rural, right? They didn't have big cities back then. Everything was spread out. It's very difficult for them to do that. So, a starter city would be Shanghai, and obviously that model worked well enough that they want to apply it nationwide, right? Because China is not this cohesive state that people like to present it as. It's not. It ain't cyberpunk yet, right? It's very split up, right? The provinces all have their own governors, and they don't always report to the central, right? That like with the Wuhan and coronavirus thing, Central didn't even know about these, the outbreaks when they happened because they're covered up by the provincial governors, right? So it's a bit of a mess there, and they have internal squabbles. The police don't always agree with each other. There's protests all the time, and so they want to bring it all together, right? They want to centralize everything. That's the goal of a single China, right? And eventually they will do this to the rest of the world as well. So this is kind of terrifying,
Okay.
because
And
Belt and Road Initiative pretty bad. I mean, look at Italy is completely dependent on Chinese business, right? It cannot exist without China. They've gone as far into Europe, farther than any other invader, if you want to call it that, right? Like the Mongols never got that far, yeah, but Chinese 100% got
okay.
there.
Interesting. Yeah, the Mongols got as far as like Eastern Europe. They certainly were in Poland. I
Yep.
don't know. I don't remember them getting into Italy.